Greetings, everyone. My name is Wayne Morin, Jr., and I am the television host of Conspiracy Network TV. I'm filming this film in the month of May, and it's something that I was never able to do throughout all the years back to 1981 and in May in 1981. So today I am a free man and I'm able to talk to people, have a book out, I have a book out, Razors of Madness. It talks a lot about the different clips that you're going to see today that I lived and was basically experienced hands-on. These are hands-on experiences. These are things that I lived, things that you and the viewers that know me now will realize the Orwellian dialect that I have lived through and communicated to my viewers and to the people who have gotten to know my story and have lived through a lot of the similarities through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s themselves. A lot of my topics, as one of the persons that you remember me being on my television show, was the great Bob Fletcher, the man that went in front of the Senate to talk about whether making and changing devices, where the senators had asked him, hey, find this information for us. He found out about the information and exposed the information of weather machines. At the time, back when nobody was talking about weather machines. But as I told Bob in that article, and when he was on my show, I had knowledge of weather machines and devices that he was talking about had become more popular in different military settings and that were being held back in secrecy, as I was even in the county jails as convicts and inmates and prisoners were creating a lot of these devices to unleash them on mankind during the tribulation. One thing I want to go ahead and say today, which is I want to give you the understanding of some of the validity of truths that I'm talking about. The truth that I'm talking about today, I will be glad to take a polygraph on the things that I am saying, on my challenges to the people that I bring out. I bring out the challenges to the synagogues. I bring out the challenges to the Catholic Church. I bring out the challenges to the law enforcement. I bring out the challenges to the mental health systems. And today's topics, I'm going to be making challenges to these people if they want to verify my proofs of what I'm talking about. I'm willing to do it, and through a lie detector and known live stream so everybody can watch while I'm being hooked into the lie detector and proving to them and in front of them that these things that I'm communicating to the people are true. One of the clips I wanted to go ahead and bring up today is a very simple clip here. And
rehabilitation for young boy prostitutes necessitates a change in the way they are handled by penal institutions. In San Francisco, boy prostitutes from around the nation congregate near some of the plushest hotels. But in San Francisco, a boy prostitute who was arrested is given special treatment.
Now, I, Wayne Morin, Jr., at the age of 13 years old, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, was going to San Bruno County Jail, to 750 Bryant Street. And during these times, I would go in front of the district attorney, in front of the judge. And at this time, the homosexual elite, the people that were working with the courts and inside the courthouses where the documents would be kept on prisoners and people that were locked up, were making these documents to fit their agenda. They were when criminals were brought into jail, they would take the documentations and make it correlate with their upcoming agenda for laws that they wanted to change, for things that they wanted to make better for themselves in the future. This is the kind of corruption that I'm going to be speaking about in today's clips and videos. These kind of things are just out there. Unless you've heard it from me or other people that know of these things, you won't hear it on your local news media. This is how they use their corruption and infiltrate and hold hostage these people. Now I'm going to play the rest of this clip, and we're going to...
Sheriff Richard Hungisto has set up a new program to deal with young boys.
The heterosexual inmates are very likely to abuse, to rape the younger person or the person they think has had homosexual experiences on the streets. They will take advantage of them by force, and sometimes they will be very, very brutal. It's a problem amongst children, juveniles, and adults.
So what has been your answer here?
We house the gay inmates separately. We don't mix them in with heterosexual population just for that reason. And of course the same thing is true with juveniles.
So as you view this problem and people like this come in off the street, how do you handle it?
Well, what we do here is to do what we can to make sure that if there are any psychological problems that they're dealt with, and also to try to aid them with post-release help, giving them opportunities as much as we can to find a job, to have a place to stay, and to get back on their feet so that they don't have to sell their bodies to make money.
Now, I myself want to go ahead and state, back at that time, even Dianne Feinstein, let me see, even today's governor, Governor Brown, were still in the mixes. They might have not been mayors, they might not have been big public officials, but at that time, back in the 70s and in the early 80s, they were working their way up in politics, and they were already bending to the agendas that I'm talking about today. Some of them didn't have the same feelings that they have exactly today, but you can see how the homosexual cabal, its talents reach out throughout the United States and going into Europe and all around the world. So let's get into another clip real quick here. One of the things that I want to make sure that you realize is that how the
and into America's churches.
The line from Kinsey to the current destruction of the Catholic Church is very direct.
In the past 4 years, more than 180 people have come forward claiming they were sexually abused by priests in this area over the past 60 years.
Consider this raw data. A survey commissioned by the U.S. Catholic Church found more than 10,000 allegations of sexual abuse involving more than 4,300 priests and deacons.
The harm done to trusting families is immeasurable and was perhaps most powerfully captured by filmmaker Amy Berg in Deliver Us from Evil, a documentary about a child-molesting priest and the anguish he brought to countless children and their parents.
I feel betrayed by the church.
One of the things that I'm going to go ahead and add to this clip is very simple. As a young boy, 9 and 10, 11 years old, my parents traveled from San Francisco back east to Massachusetts, where I went to a couple Catholic schools at that time. At that time, I had already been singled out to be in these schools for a reason. And while I was in this Catholic school when I was back east, it was called Ursuline Academy, and it was in Chickadee, Massachusetts. At that time, the homosexuality was also prevalent back then. Already back then, homosexuality was prevalent. And as I became more of a boy in the in 1970, in the early 70s, I went to Christian Brothers boarding school for boys in Mount LaSalle in here in the Sonoma Valley, in the Napa Valley, where homosexuality with the priests, going into the priest's room and noticing that, hey, boy, brother such and such has a stack of Playboy magazines, and he's got his bottles of beer and his booze out there and cigarettes burning in the ashtray. Oops, I seen that. But the other boys were flowing into the rooms and the back rooms. It was very well known that there was a lot of homosexuality, and I was used, as it states in the scripture, as Timothy describes it, the scripture as the church that will not allow its members to marry. So we're talking about the Catholic Church there, and I'm willing to take a polygraph that the homosexuals had been already planning and infiltrating the Catholic Church with their pedophile lifestyle to molest these boys and to do this. I'm willing to take a lie detector on that too. So we have that.
Part of the confusion is over why many of our judges send repeat sex offenders back into our neighborhoods, knowing it is simply a matter of time before they strike again. Can the reason be that these same judges are compromised by their own sexual addiction?
We know that the judges are they're human. They're like everybody else.
Cases of judges who are compromised by porn are documented across the country. But the license for such behavior may have been issued in 1970, when Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas and retired Justice Arthur Goldberg wrote articles for Playboy magazine. But why would an association with a soft porn magazine like Playboy be cause for concern? And how could it pertain to the world of pedophiles? The disturbing answer to this question as our history of this movement unfolds. In 1990, the American Bar Association reported that 80% of convicted child molesters plea bargain and serve no prison time.
That being said, when I was on a transfer, one of my first send down to Atascaderos, my first admission to Atascadero, it was in the 70s, the late 70s, my first admission there. Pedophiles were the majority of the people. Molesters and pedophiles were the majority of everybody. And they were in there and they were swapping magazines, trading True Detective magazines. Sexual promiscuity was rampant. Transgenders, drag queens was rampant. And at that time, it was a slap on the wrist. And most of the pedophiles were using the law libraries to make writs to just get out. They were going in and out, in and out, in and out. And I'll take a lie detector test to prove this too. And how I was used personally for these people to be unleashed on mankind. And that's why this whole thing is being brought up today, because the people need to know and realize that I was a pinnacle part of these things being unleashed on mankind for the reasons of religious beliefs, their religious beliefs. They needed a sacrificial lamb to unleash these things. Now we go up here into this this next clip where I will show you, and I talk about in my book, Razors of Madness, how a doctor that I spoke of, a Dr. Helen Reinan, inside the book, used to work at a sex lab in Atascadero State Hospital. She was known for screening and doing tests on the penal type lie detection tests for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands throughout the years of her working down there. And these men are notorious for reoffending right after they get out. Here's a clip that pertains to some of the things that you'll hear for yourself And in my book, I mention a doctor that was once in Atascadero that moved to Napa State Hospital, became a doctor there. You have to read the book to understand the velocity of this nightmare unleashed on mankind.
There are 5 phases of treatment at Coalinga. Patients are judged on their progress in therapy through regular tests. These are either polygraphs, lie detector tests, or a form of sexual test called the PPG.
He's our PPG technician.
How do you do? Nice to meet you.
He's responsible for administering the PPG, and the results I help him interpret and write up.
What does PPG stand for?
It stands for a penile plethysmograph assessment. It's a phallometric assessment.
Basically, it is literally measuring the penis size.
Correct.
In terms of how aroused a man is.
Correct. Do you have an extra gauge? It's very soft, and it's filled with mercury inside. And so the individual places this gauge on the shaft of the penis. Feel it. You can feel it.
Like that?
Yeah. And then they're shown a mix of normative stimuli to consenting adult, either males or females or a combination, as well as deviant stimuli, rape scenes involving adult women, as well as audio scenes involving children, or still slides or videos involving sexually suggestive scenes with children.
Not actual child porn, then?
No, they're not nude. So they're clad in bathing suits, and it's sexually suggestive, such as playing in a pool, playing with water, a hose, eating fruit, things like that.
Do they sit in here when the thing is going on? You sit in here. I sit in here. Where does this go?
So that's a clean chuck, and what happens is the individual is asked to sit in this chair. They're also asked to slide the table over them and put their hands on top of the table, because one classic way of being deceptive is to put the gauge on your fingers and just sit there. It's one method of determining whether they're answering honestly to the PPG stimuli. There's lots of reasons why an individual might be deceptive during this test, and so we have different types of ways to reduce any deceptive activities.
I'm sure not too many of the victims feel the same way that she feels, and I'm sure that San Francisco being up to from the 70s on up to about the mid 80s, it was known as the MDSO capital of California. That's the mentally disordered sex offender capital of California. But today it's just blanched over as a safe city for everybody. Well, that's all fine and dandy. Let's get back into the more of these clips here. Now, as for the serial killers, and I mean, for the longest time, the serial killers had worked closely, meaning that it would never be mentioned that the majority of the serial killers, Bonnie and Clyde, Clyde Barrow was a homosexual. People wouldn't know that. You see him with a machine gun, he's got a girl, a mall on him. They're all like, oh, what a cool couple. But little do people know that Clyde Barrow was a homosexual. And the list goes on. Here's just a short list that I did with Colin Gunn on the show that we did when he was here with the clip when he was here with Indoctrination. Take a listen to this. And as I'll read this last moment, and as I talk to my final thoughts on today's show, and it's supposed to have the parents take notice on back of me. There we go. It says, my final thoughts on the seriousness concerned to SB 48 Soleno mandates that kids be taught to admire So when a student or child has a question about Alexander the Great or Roman Empire Caligula or Nero or Vladimir Lenin or Joseph Stalin or Karl Marx or Benito Mussolini or Ernest Röhm or Adolf Hitler or Jacques Delannoy or Manuel Noriega or Maria KGB of Russia or Marquis Assad or Lawrence of Arabia or Lyndon B. Johnson or Hubert Humphrey or J. Edgar Hoover or James Jesus Angleton or Kate Michelman or Governor Mary Como or Governor Ann Richardson or Mayor Giuliani or Karl Rove or Clyde Barrow or John Walker Lind or Jim Baker or Jim Jones or Donald Harvey or Patrick Wayne Kearney or Dean Corll or Juan Corona or Ortis O'Toole or Henry Lee Lucas or Richard Speck or Bruce Davis or Andrew Cunanan or Randy Stephen Kraft or Wayne Williams or William Bond, are they going to need to be re-educated or need some sensitivity training classes? Teens and children will and are being taught to admire the LBGT Americans. Stay informed, get active in an organization or a church group that feels the same way as you. I suggest Save California, Americans for Truth, and Power of Prophecy. Thank you very much for everyone being on today's show. You see that the number of names of homosexuals in there that were mentioned as serial killers. I mean, not every single one of those were serial killers, of course, but the homosexuals that how through the years of the media just leaving that part quiet, not wanting to be offensive, you know. But the offensive part of acknowledgement is how these two work closely hand in hand together through the years, and how democracy it basically has come back on us. We're starting to reap what we basically were trying to be helpful and kind to them. Now it's coming back as a taunt and a haunt to us. You know, what we do is what we get back in return, as the word democracy. And now we're getting that back. So if you were all the way back then fighting and exposing these things, you're one up on everybody, like a lot of us are. But there's not a lot of us, so we're out here making this information available to you to be able to do these things and stay on top of these things. Now, I know a lot of this stuff is very hard for you to understand. Now, this is where we're going to start getting into a little bit more to the religious parts of the story, the structures here. And it's pretty pertinent because the Jews are always looking for a sign. The Jews look for the sign. And in 1980, I basically was released from Napa State Hospital, and I was going home to San Francisco. And as I was going through this rainbow tunnel here, the rainbow tunnel, going about ready to head through the Golden Gate Bridge, going into the Golden Gate Bridge, I looked towards the left side of me as we're going into the tunnel, and I saw this diagram here, this diagram. Here's a diagram, and it said in a visionary type lettering, it said, "Welcome the world, Satan." And then there was a cocktail glass with a toothpick and an olive, with the red pimento and the olive, and a picture of a woman's face. Now, I didn't know this woman's face, and I'm sort of like, I'm going through this rainbow tunnel, and I'm seeing this picture off on the side here, okay? Now, when I got to my home later on that day, where Grandma had set me up in an apartment, my grandmother, rest in peace with her, she basically, there was a person that, at that time, named Dee Dee Selland, that lived at the apartment building that I've never seen before in my life, which was the same exact face of that "Welcome to the World" Satan. That was, it was her picture and her face. Mitch, before I even got to the house, we seen this. Her same picture, her same look-alike picture was in a Hustler magazine. She had her hair a little different, but her face was the same face. She was wearing more of a wig, a shaggy wig, but was in the issue of the Hustler magazine where Larry Flint was President Ronald Reagan's favorite pornographer. As we go to the book, Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips, and their documentation on pornography and mind control. You will find that in her book. Larry Flynt was Reagan's favorite pornographer. We go ahead and we look and see that she was in the article of Larry Flynt, not the same woman. I'm not saying this is D.D. Selland, but the same exact look-alike for me seeing this person at that time. She herself was on the cross in the one issue that Larry Flynt got in a lot of trouble with, a woman being on the cross, the crucifix, with King of Jews over her head, with the man that was the Roman, was on side, having sex with her in a couple scenes in the pornography magazine, Larry Flynt. So this is how pre-planned they did this. This is for a group of people that were looking for a sign. And I'm willing to take a polygraph and do this live for people all over the world to have proof and evidence of this, okay? Now, at that same time of these things going on, of course, it was very close to getting closer to when the rapture with Hal Lindsey's book that had already been publicized for a number of years now, Hal Lindsey's book, The Late Great Planet Earth, and Hal Lindsey was known as the Jeremiah for the people that were in the pre-tribulation rapture doctrine, who believed in the rapture, people be whisked away, and the Jewish people were the chosen people of all the world, that they themselves could had Israel as proof, and the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's lineage all verified for them. But I am willing to go ahead and to challenge the Temple Institute, Mordecai Prince and Yesariel Ariel of the Temple Institute, taking a lie detector test and proving to these men beyond reasonable doubt that the synagogues throughout San Francisco and the churches, the Plymouth Brethren, the churches that believed in the rapture at that time, that was going to be imminent. Any day the rapture was going to happen. We had Hal Lindsey, we had Jimmy Swaggart, we had every pre-tribulation rapture ranter out there in the world that was basically, we even have we don't have an eclipse today, but if you remember, there was Tammy and Jimmy Baker. They had the dialing wheel where you could spin and give them money, and then you could go to Heritage USA and stay a few nights at the Heritage USA apartments, where you would be whisked into heaven from the apartment that you got to lease and give your money to go and be at this place before you entered paradise, because you were going to be raptured. You were a Christian, and you paid your dues, and you did everything. I will take a lie detector on this, that I was used for this, to be murdered in front of everybody so these things could fall into place, for the Jewish scriptures to be unleashed on mankind. Now, the Jews were looking for a sign, okay? And these are some of the things that through the years that the proofs and the evidences, from when I was a little boy, people would talk in different areas about me. Oh, look, he has a glow over his head. And then as I became a young man, in the picture you see after me at the baptism place with Tetsafanasi, the second picture. The third picture, you see my first admission picture at Napa State Hospital. At that time, they were already calling me a heifer, heaven's heifer, he's heaven's heifer, heaven scented. So you see the picture of the heifer there on the side, and that all pertains to when, now that I'm older, in the 1980s, that they were preparing to have me murdered. The Jewish people and the churches were involved too. The Plymouth Brethren churches and the all the Methodists, and there's a list of names that I can go through. Okay, now we have the Jewish people and their artifacts, which people, the Temple Mount Institute, people have proofs that they have all these bells and whistles that they need to have done before the Messiah or their elected David returns. Now, this is pretty pertinent because you see that the different type of the priests have priestly garments, and they have things that they have to wear as they are being the priests. They have certain things that they have to wear. And I will give proof and evidence that in the 1980s, 81, that the Temple Mount already had a newsletter out basically saying that they had all these things ready to go for the return of what Hal Lindsey had been saying, what the 10 kings of European nation that was just fulfilled. There was 10 kings around that same time that fulfilled the prophecies. I have all that information ready to share with people. Now, one of the things that we want to remember is that during this time of these indoctrinations of how these the churches, the pre-tribulation church and the Catholic Church and the Methodists and through the 70s on up, they were basically holding on. There was so much sexual revolution, and there was so much different types of new things, burning the bra, going to universities, protesting war. There were so many different types, but California was one of the places that basically, and through its Hollywood and through its medias, basically, you can go back to just to the Hollywood and realize that a lot of these things were given to the rest of the world and put into the understandings of why the churches were failing so bad at that time. When you come to the signs of the end times, we see all the different things that were going on, the sexual revolution, the homosexuals having their understandings of the American Medical Society, changing the diagnose, which they themselves shouted at the top of their lungs and made the psychiatrists that were there scared. So they basically changed. They were for giving them a chance on that, but that's not how things should be run. That's not how things are. And I was used for that too. I'm willing to go ahead and state that I was used for those things as a person to unleash these monsters on mankind during the tribulation. Now, I want to go ahead and bring you back to this picture, back to the 1980s right here. Now, this picture here is a picture that when I was just released from the state hospital in Napa at that time, that these were distributed through different organizations, through the churches, and through the homosexuals, and the homosexuals would get these to the churches that they were already infiltrated in the San Francisco area, and from there the Cabalists passed these diagrams out, or had people make these diagrams. And they're not all the same, and they're not all. It could be, as long as they have these ingredients in them. They have the stick boy with the aura over his head. They have the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. The basket, the shopping cart of for people doing the shopping and the things of the home items, and the mini bike and the street lamp and the little thing that looks like a part of creation, a fiery spirit, a little fiery spirit. These were used to say magical words and say sort of like to conjure while you were mixing these things together to get the effect that you needed to have spiritual powers and miracle working powers during the days of wonders, the day of wonders. Now I'm going to go into a clip, but before I go into the clip, I want to tell you the exactness of this movie of Tribulation, the clip that I'm going to play here. When they tried to murder me for the sign that I've been talking about today, the Jews need a sign, they had a person that snuck into my house into my mattress, was squished up in beside my mattress, was wearing an all black leotard, a black cap, black mask, and basically was in between my mattress and my box spring. I went to lay down on it. It was wobbling. The person crawled out underneath the bed, tried to cut me with a straight razor. I saw my window, and I ran for the window and jumped out the window and went out. This is all the same exact thing, type information that they're trying to dilute and water down in this movie for the pre-tribulation rapture. The people that believe that they're going to be whisked away, there's going to be no whisking away. Any of the scripture that you've read, the people have read in Americas and have gone by, if you haven't read Tex Mars's book, DNA Science and the Jewish Bloodline, then you're not even starting to get a clue of how much is falsified, because the people that believe and the Jewish people, that are chosen people, have to start everything that they've ever known about these people over again, because there is not any proof that these people not only have any Jewish bloodline that leads them to being in the people that they're saying they are in biblical scripture. Before the time of 1948, they never stuck a toe into Jerusalem in the first place. Let me go ahead and play this clip here that is a predominant Jew-first Zionist movie. These are people that worship the Jews and love the Jews, the Hagees, the Lahayes. All these people make millions and millions of dollars off of them, and they are the Goyms, and they call us the Goyms, and they hate us because we try to give them the proof and the evidences that what they've been reading has been a falsify and a lie, and they need to focus on themselves instead of trying to hurt and manipulate everybody else.
One man is about to discover.
What else did he say?
An evil looking for revenge.
You're going to run away again, aren't you?
Dark forces waiting to strike. And a serpent plotting to rule.
And it was given unto me to make war on the saints.
But before Tom Canberra can realize the truth,
we will beat him this time.
Beat who?
God.
He is thrown into oblivion and into the Great Tribulation. Cloud 10 Pictures proudly presents Gary Busey.
Now, one of the things I want to tell you, before this happened, before this clip gets any further, I was supposed to be, after I went through that window and landed, if I would have been paralyzed in any which way or form, I was supposed to be put in a suspended animation type position to where during the Day of Wonders, the device that you're going to see here in a moment, which the Antichrist goes around and gives everybody this device where they can put it on their head, and after they put it on their head, if they've had any type of a disease or AIDS or anything, it's cured like that. They're no longer have, that will happen in the Day of Wonders. The men that I was with in the county jails, from going up into this, from the 70s on into the 80s, we were all creating these devices. If any of the men that are out there are watching this clip, you can talk to them, or I can take a polygraph test to prove that these type of devices, the flying machines, the make yourself invisible machines, the proofs, and the prison system is full of secrecy when it comes to devices like this, electronic devices. California has more prisons in this one state than all the states in the world combined. Now remember, during the tribulation, all hell was supposed to be broken loose on mankind. Christians were to be hunted, and the prisoners that were unleashed in mankind were supposed to do the hunting. So it was going to be a horrible time of these prisoners going out and reaping havoc. A lot of times when I was in the county jail, prisoners would be taken out specially and just cut back loose into the society because they were working with some type of law enforcement agency to promote this type of agenda for the future for the tribulation. And in the prison system to this very day, law enforcement knows it. a lot of the young gladiator schools, the Prestons, the Tracys, before they go to Folsoms, are used for this position here to unleash the hell from the prisons on mankind when time comes for the race wars and these type of policies that are been used in California. Let's get back into this clip, and I'm willing to take a polygraph test on that too. It's not just the Southerners, it's not just the Northerners, the Indian gangs, the Chinese gangs, the Asian gangs. They all have their positions when it comes to these things.
Change my what, Eileen? My life? My mind?
Howie Mandel.
And I believed it. All of it.
Margot Kidder.
It is real. All of it is real.
And Nick Mancuso.
Do you think that I care about them?
In the soul-winning, explosive thriller, Tribulation. Prepare for the future.
Now, you've seen that one device he just put on the head of that person. That device is where the person goes into this other realm where the person has not an arm on his shoulder, but once he puts on the device and he aligns himself with the Antichrist, that arm is fixed. He has an arm to be able to use both of those arms again. These devices, like I told at the time, Bob Fletcher, when he was on our last show, I had already had pre-knowledge of these devices, and I have knowledge of these devices today, and I've brought them up to law enforcement agencies before in the past. I'm willing to take a lie detector test and proof on this. We want people to know that for the longest times that I've been talking about miracle working machines and how the prisons changed times and laws with back in the scripture of Daniel's during the 80s, how cocaine was so rampant that the courts, and cocaine wasn't even basically a criminal offense back. It was a party favor. We talked about the Hal Lindsays, and we talked about the Rapture Machine, Project Bluebeam, and we've talked about, earthquake machines and wars and violence and riots that were pre-planned to be set forth during the tribulation time, during when the rapture was supposed to happen, and the Christians were whisked off into the cloud by Hal Lindsey and the other Tim LaHaye's and Jimmy Swaggarts, and all the way down to the Jim Baker, who had that dialing for dollars, sort of like a dialing for dollars. Come to the PTL's Heritage USA, where you can live out your last days before the rapture comes. We've exposed those for many, many years and have done this. On my websites that I discuss tell you that I've given proof in prophecy and was used for those things. It was used for those miracle working machines that the devil was going to unleash, the false prophet and the messiahs. And I'm always willing to take a polygraph test. I'm always willing to go online and gather your churches that might have been part of that, and the Jewish people and the churches know about these devices, and they're going to use them, because none of the churches today, the 7 churches that God spoke about at the time when he was on earth, he was giving them the thumbs down there. They were not doing good at all. They were not following any of the positions. And he told them at the time he would return quickly. And the devil is angry. And what we're seeing here today and around the world right now is the fruition of the best time in mankind's life to be able to be part of exposing and telling the truth for Christ. Be able to get down on your knees and say, Jesus, I know all these things that happened in my life. I was so afraid to say, well, what was happened to these people or those people would say this, but it's finally come to her. All the fruition, the states, the things that they're talking about wanting to do in the world now, is such a beautiful time to be a salt and a beacon of light. So that being said today, brothers and sisters, I'm here for your challenges. And like I said, to any of the groups out there that need proof and evidence of these things of being a fact, I'm willing to take a polygraph test for you to come on to my show and I'll reiterate the questions. We'll talk about the questions. We want them to be live. We want them to be where churches are involved, law enforcement's involved, schools are involved while I'm answering these questions, because this right here, these informations, even though the majority of a lot of people already know these things are a fact and truth, they're quiet and they're keeping it as secrecy. They're keeping it under secret wraps, and we understand why, because they want, as the church, the 7 churches from the very beginning, and this thing with the Jewish people about them being some chosen book of people, and in the 1980s when they were the Hal Lindsey's and the Pre-Tribulation Church, the Plymouth Brethren, the Baptist Church all over America were all worshiping this to the Jewish people, the chosen tribe, to realize that when I got thrown out of this window, they didn't come and apologize right away. And Miss Nichols that lived downstairs, and Deirdre Selland that did these things. All these people have proof and evidences of these facts from San Francisco, and the paperwork and the paper trail of my incarcerations in jails and facilities goes lengthy back to where, when I'm talking about these homosexual cabals that changing the wordings when people are being locked up and arrested to change laws and make their laws benefit for their lifestyles, and all these things with the governors that are now governors and what they were positions they were, milking and helping and being the comfort cushion for them as they're getting stronger and as the world is becoming more and more corrupt, is all available. I'm here ready to do this. I'm ready to go to bat if you need me to expose these topics on these topics. Thank you for letting me share this with you today. And I hope that you get down on your knees and you pray to God and you ask God to use this material to benefit your life. Thank you so very much.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.